Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here, yeehaw, and it's Monday. On Mondays, we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays, we wear pink.
Hey guys! Oh, big gulps, huh? Alright. Well, see you later.
I've been thinking so much about held items and battle items recently. I've been doing a no items run up to the master rank, which by the way, I am working on. We will get to master rank before the new season, although I think the videos are probably going to come out as the new season has hit, just because there's a lot. There's a lot that I have to do to make it there all in one sitting here, basically tomorrow. So let's take a look at our tiers here for our held items and battle items. We're going to start with held items, and I'm going to talk to you about why I think an item is placed where it is, what Pokemon it's useful for, what Pokemon it's not useful for, what might make this item better, or why this item is maybe low on the tier list. And I will also specifically say that this tier list is focused on solo, duo, trio play, and not as much focused on competitive play. And that really ties into one item specifically, but I figured I should make mention that this is mainly focused on solo, duo, trio play. So we've got our S tier, hotness, our A tier, mostly hotness, our B tier, you know, still got our B tier, so C tier, not so hotness, and our D tier, our Decidueye Memorial tier. Let's start with something that is an S tier item in my opinion. I don't think many people would argue this. It is a Muscle Band. So Muscle Band, really good for physical attackers, really good for literally almost any Pokemon in the game takes great advantage of this. There are very few that won't take advantage of this item at all, even if they are not a physical attacker. What this does is every time you attack, it is doing chip damage based on the enemy's max HP. So if you're an Eldegoss, if you're a Pikachu, if you're a Cinderace, like any Pokemon who's ranged and auto attacks a lot takes huge advantage of this. Lots of melee Pokemon take great advantage. This is amazing on Charizard. I'm trying to think who even doesn't like it. Literally running this item on any Pokemon in the game gives you value. Any Pokemon, even if they're not attack based. I felt like my voice cracked there. I was like, not attack based. Even if they're not attack based. Any Pokemon in the game gets great value from this. So Muscle Band, one of the best items in the game. One of the items you should definitely use a level 30 item enhancer on if you have not already. It's just incredible. The attack speed's very tricky. I have videos about it on my channel, but that's not the main reason you run it. It's because the extra damage you get all the time with an item like this. It's so good, especially on anything ranged. I mean, you really can't go wrong with this item. Let's take a look at an A tier item. Okay. Attack weight. Attack weight's A tier. It's honestly almost an S tier item. Basically, any Pokemon that really benefits from attack stat does so well with this item. So this is run on every all-rounder basically. You run this on Lucario, Zarina, Machamp, you put it on so many Pokemon. It's great on Charizard if you can get the stacks in. It's not even bad on an attack-based Pokemon like Cinderace or Greninja. Actually does pretty well with this item. The only issue is some Pokemon have a pretty hard time stacking and are often not played in lane or path, as the game calls it. So if you're playing a Cinderace or a Greninja, you may not find the opportunities to stack this item. However, the amount of extra attack this gives you, it's like gaining a ton of levels early. So your Pokemon is a lot stronger than it should be at that point in the game. This item is incredibly good. Honestly, on any attack-based Pokemon, it's pretty much an S tier item. You just have to understand that you need to score. You need to stack up your attack weight. Honestly, there are times where our entire team will be moving up towards Regieleki, and I see a Zarina staying in the bottom path, and I think, I don't even care if they're down there as long as they're stacking their attack weight, and they're going to be stacked up for the rest of the game. It takes 6 stacks to get fully stacked up, and then you have a ton of extra attack. And when you're an attack-based Pokemon, this affects everything. It affects your basic attacks, it affects your moves. Oftentimes your passive or your unite move will be based around your attack stats. So it just does so much. Stacking in this game is really good, especially with an attack weight. Definitely an A tier item. Let's take a look at a B tier item right here. B tier item, I would say, yeah, this is an interesting one, but I think it's pretty B tier. We'll say Wise Glasses, pretty B tier. I think, and you know what? I'll pull up choice specs as well while we're talking about this. I think choice specs kind of beats out wise glasses just about every day of the week on most all special attackers. A few special attackers take advantage of wise glasses, and there are just a couple Pokemon in the game that all you care about is damage output. And this, I mean, comes to mind as characters like Mew, Gengar, Gardevoir. A lot of them just really care about damage output with their special attack. You'd probably end up running choice specs and wise glasses almost always, and I think the math bears this out. There may be a couple Pokemon that are off here, but almost always you're just going to get more value, in my opinion, out of choice specs. So choice specs not only give you extra special attack, but they also get this extra pop of damage. I believe it's on an 8-second internal cooldown every time you hit with a move. So if you're using your moves a lot, which you should be, there's no mana in Pokemon Unite or anything like that. Your moves are just on a cooldown. If you're using your moves a lot and doing a lot of damage, this is just extra damage all the time, plus it increases your special attack. So I think choice specs, solid A, and I think wise glasses are fine, a B tier choice. B tier for this video, I think they're going to be fine choices, but oftentimes something else probably beats it out. You don't run wise glasses on too many Pokemon. Let's take a look at a C tier choice. Yeah, Assault Vest. Assault Vest, I would say, is a C tier choice. Now, recently in the meta, when Mew, Mime, and Glaceon were picked as often as they were, I actually think on Defenders, this became a very viable third slot item. So a lot of the time when you're looking at Pokemon, you'll notice that you're kind of talking about one item or maybe two items that kind of move around, but a lot of Pokemon have an item that's particularly good. So with defenders and supporters, you know, things like buddy barriers, focus bands, score shields, things like that have a lot of value because these Pokemon have a ton of health. So I think you're often looking for what your third slot item is going to be. Could it be a score shield? Maybe. Could it be an item giving you some, you know, extra special attack, a muscle band? Possibly. But recently, Assault Vest has been pretty good. The big problem with this is if you run into an enemy team with very little special attack, this item doesn't have a ton of value. So when you don't have a good idea of what you're going up against, this loses a bunch of value. When you have a pretty good feeling that you're going up against a lot of special attack, this increases in value. And in fact, on some supporters and defenders, I would say it becomes a really good A or B tier item. But because it's so inconsistent when you're playing solo, duo, trio, you just don't know what you're going against. I think this item at best is kind of a C tier. Every once in a while, you're going to love it. And then every once in a while, you're going to feel like you could have had anything else. Let's take a look at a D tier item. Nothing's changing here. Leftovers. Leftovers are just not very good. They give you some extra health. I know that they trigger faster now, so your health regen comes up faster. I still don't think it's that useful. It's just not that much health fast enough, in my opinion. I'd like to play around more with it, and I'd be really happy if this item becomes better and starts to actually get a lot of use. Right now, I just think it's still not enough. See, the nice thing about Assault Vest is when you're out of combat for whatever it is, 4 or 5 seconds now, your Assault Vest triggers and you get this big shield. But with Leftovers, it's not as if you're outside of combat for 4 or 5 seconds, then you just, you get 1500 health or something like that. It's a slow tick of extra health, and then as soon as you resume combat, it's gone. And because of that, I think it's a fine starter item. Just don't put any points into it, and as soon as you can, start upgrading other things that are better for your Pokemon. Let's see. Let's talk about another S tier. I think Scope Lens is an S tier item. So if you're a Pokemon that takes advantage of critical hit, you should use Scope Lens. Absol should use a Scope Lens. Charizard, Scope Lens. Azumarill, oftentimes, Scope Lens. Even though it doesn't increase the critical hit chance, Azumarill is always a critical hit if it hits one target. It increases the critical hit damage, and you get extra damage on your basics. Many Pokemon that take advantage of critical hits do really well with the Scope Lens. Greninja is another great example of a Pokemon that does well with a Scope Lens. It's one of those weird items where you're not going to want to run a Scope Lens on Mr. Mime, but of course you're not. That's not what we're talking about. Any Pokemon that takes advantage of big crits, does really well with the scope lens. I think scope lens is one of the best items in the game, and it's another item that you should definitely get to level 30 if you're using Pokemon that critically hit. One of the coolest things about this item, and you may not know this, not only is it increasing critical hit chance and your critical hit damage, which is just awesome, it also does an extra proc of damage when you get a critical hit with a basic attack. So your basic attacks will critically hit, and then this pops another extra bit of damage. It kind of feels like choice specs, but based around critical hits on your basic attacks. This is great for Pokemon, again, like Cinderace, Greninja, Decidueye, this works really well with Charizard. Oh, Dragonite, I love this on Dragonite as well. It's ranged, it has a good critical hit chance, so I think this is one of the best items in the game, and a no-brainer level 30 item. Let's talk about an A tier item. While we're on the topic of critical hits, let's talk about Razor Claw. Razor Claw is awesome. It's one of my favorite items in the game. I actually think this is maybe a little underrated in most people's eyes. I think Razor Claw is so good. After you use any move, your next basic attack will slow the enemy if you're melee, and it will do an extra pop of damage, and that's for any Pokemon. It doesn't matter if you're an attack-based Pokemon. This will give any Pokemon additional critical hit, and it will give any Pokemon the ability to get that extra pop of damage. Now, Pokemon that have a high attack stat take even more advantage of this. I actually really love this on Pokemon like Duraludon and things like that. I love a Pokemon, Dragonite's another one I love it on, just because you Dragon Dance all the time, so you get all these extra bits of damage with a Razor Claw. And then there are a lot of attack-based Pokemon that are melee that I really like having an item like this on, because enemies just seem to want to run away from you, obviously. And if you're using moves a lot, you get a ton of value out of a Razor Claw. I really love this item. I think it's awesome on tons of attack-based Pokemon, melee and ranged, even though only melee takes advantage of that slowdown. Let's see, a nice B tier item would be, okay, Floatstone. Floatstone is near and dear to my heart right now. It used to be one of the worst items in the game, but now with its lower cooldown, internal cooldown activation time, you actually find yourself getting a lot more value out of this item. The map feels big. It feels like you're moving in between top and bottom point more often now. And there are a lot of Pokemon that I really enjoy running Floatstone on. Dodrio, Talonflame, but really anything if you're making your way across the map a lot and you're an attack-based Pokemon. One cool thing to think about with a Floatstone is, let's say you don't like stacking with a Pokemon, but you want that extra attack. Floatstone is kind of like getting an item with a stack or two in it. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but maybe it's more like one stack in it. But it's almost like you have an item that gives you a stack right away. It gives you some base move speed, and when you're out of combat for just a little bit, you get some extra movement speed. It's actually so much better than it used to be. I hesitate to put it any higher, but on a few Pokemon, this item is so freaking cool. Another C tier item for this list, probably special attack specs. Now, here's the thing. Stacking is amazing in this game, and you can get a lot of value out of this item for a few Pokemon. I think Gengar does very well with it. Gardevoir is also another Pokemon. These Pokemon just love having more special attack, but the thing I've noticed is special attackers aren't great at stacking. They're really not. They just don't have the mobility for it. They're often... It feels like the attackers really early have dashes. They're able to get to the goal fast. Usually get 3 stacks or at least 2 right at the start of the match. And that doesn't feel the same for your special attackers. They're just too slow, too squishy, and it's a little too hard to get a lot of your stacks in. They also don't seem to scale as well as your attackers, and your basic attacks don't scale off special attack for your special attackers. Your boosteds do, but your basic attacks don't. And for that reason, I think this item is just extremely niche. It's cool, and I love to stack. Oh, I don't have it on here. I hit my that's a stack button and nothing happened. I was gonna prove a point. That's a stack. Okay, I proved my point. I love to stack, but at the same time, I just don't think it's super useful for a lot of the special attackers in the game. However, there are a few that work pretty well with it. You know what? One that's great with it is Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime's ratios are awesome, and it's easy to stack with it because it's just such a bulky Pokemon that just runs at your face. Another Decidueye Memorial tier is Rocky Helmet. This item is just bad. I don't know what's going on with it. It just doesn't activate enough. It doesn't do enough damage. it's tricky. It's tricky to Rocky Helm all night. All right, it's tricky. It's tricky. The thing about Rocky Helm is, if they keep making it better and better and better, all of a sudden it hits a threshold where it's on every single tank Pokemon in the game. But right now it's just not there. You're not going to like this item. You're not going to get any value out of it. I wish you would. I wish that defense and special defense really helped enough to make this item super viable. It's just not the case, and it just doesn't activate often enough. Please run almost anything else in the entire game. Honestly, probably even leftovers are better than this item. Another S tier item. Okay, Focus Band. Focus Band is amazing. There are some players who don't like Focus Band, and I haven't been running it that much myself lately, but that doesn't mean this item isn't insanely good. It's just kind of a get out of jail free card. It's a massive heal to your Pokemon that's on, what is it, a 70, 80 second internal cooldown timer. If you play your cards right and you just notice your timers, you'll have it up for, you know, the Rayquaza fight, and it gives you a massive amount of health regeneration. Oftentimes, it can be the difference maker between getting KO'd and not. And if you don't get KO'd and your enemy does, the difference between your team having a Pokemon present and fighting and the other team not is so massive that you can start to snowball the enemy team. So an item like this really changes things. I think it's absolutely incredible. S tier for sure, especially if you're just starting out. An amazing item to throw on every single Pokemon on your roster, essentially. You really can't go wrong with it. A tier, let's talk about Buddy Barrier. I think Buddy Barrier is still amazing. You honestly might even put it S. Honestly, it's probably still S. I'm not even gonna lie. I think this item's still really amazing. There are probably more. Here's the cool thing about Unite right now. There are more often times that you don't need to run a Buddy Barrier, which I think is exciting. It used to be just completely broken. It's stacked with other shields. You stacked it with a score shield. You could get multiple Buddy. It was just gross. And it was 40% of your health. It was ludicrous, and to not run it felt criminal. Right now, though, I still think you can put it on almost any Pokemon in the game and get a ton of value out of it. Special supporters, defenders, especially because they have huge health bars. This gives you a big shield when you're fighting in combat. I mean, it's great. And you and an ally getting a shield around some of the later fights, around, you know, a big Regieleki fight or a Rayquaza fight, it's big. I could see someone arguing that it's A tier maybe because some other items are kind of rising in value now that its health percentage of the shield percentage it gives you has been lowered, but still I think it's probably an S tier item. Let's do an A tier then. Energy Amp. Energy Amp is a weird one because I think, interestingly enough, with the Unite move nerfs. So if you don't know about this, Unite moves, at one point I used to always think of it as your Pokemon went Super Saiyan basically. So you just got increased attack speed and attack and defense and special defense and cooldowns and everything basically. Now each Pokemon and each role kind of gets something different. So Talonflame gets 80% move speed, and I think it gets cooldown reduction, and every Pokemon basically gets something different when they unite. So you're not as across the board insane, but if you're a Pokemon that wants to do a ton of damage with their unite move, and you unite often, I think this is a great choice. I like this on Pikachu, I like this on Delphox, it's pretty good on Charizard, it's pretty good on Cramorant, it's pretty good. I mean, any Pokemon where you feel like you're going to use your Unite move and then you're going to kind of go off inside of an encounter, I think this is a really, really solid item. It also gives cooldown reduction and charges your Unite faster. Eos Cookie. Eos Cookie, I'd say, is a B tier item. It's actually better, I think, than people give it credit for. On the Pokemon who stack well, if you stack your Eos Cookie when you're scoring, you get so much extra health. It's actually a lot more than people think. So there are a few Pokemon that I think take advantage of this in some really exciting ways. Zarina, Triple Axle Zarina, and Dodrio. I think Tri-Attack Dodrio, maybe even Drill Peck as well. So if you stack a lot and you have an ability to recharge your health like Triple Axle Zarina does, you essentially have this really big pool of health that you get to tap into more often. Now, if you're a Pokemon that really doesn't have a way to get their health back, or you don't have a Blissey on your team or something like that, maybe you could just say, all right, drop the Eos cookie, run a buddy barrier, run a focus band. And that very well may be true. But if you have the ability to regain a lot of your health, I just think this gives you more health more often. And depending on the Pokemon you are, I mean, this could be an increase of 3 or 4 levels of HP. So you're essentially a level, and I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, but you're a level 9 Dodrio, but you've got the HP pool of a level 13 or 14 Dodrio if this is stacked up. And that is a huge difference on some Pokemon. Eos Cookie, I think, is better than people give it credit for, but you have to be willing to stack and wanting to do it often. Let's talk about experience share. So, experience share, I think, is a very good item competitively. Probably an A tier item competitively, maybe even better depending on your team comp. Solo, duo, trio, this is the worst item in the game. And, well, maybe it's even C tier. Honestly, it's not. Maybe it's C tier. Here's the thing. When you're playing solo, duo, or trio, you probably can't take advantage of this because if you're a competent player, I guarantee you've got at least one player on your team that for whatever reason, even if they're the Greninja that's in the central area, your jungler or whatever, they are a lower level than you. Your EXP share is essentially doing nothing for you. Solo, duo, trio, just stay away from this item. Basically, stay away from anything here in this bottom tier right here, solo, duo, trio. However, coordinated play, this is a really cool item. It lets you distribute XP in a bigger way. So if you or an ally KO a wild Pokemon and you happen to be the lowest XP on the team, it distributes more experience than it would have otherwise. I believe the way it works is, whereas before, if you're standing near a wild Pokemon and your ally KOs it, you get 30% XP and they get 70%. Forgive me if these numbers are slightly off. Now you get 30% still, but your ally gets 100%. So it's a really cool way to help give experience where it's necessary. And because you're a support Pokemon, oftentimes when you're taking this, you are the lowest level on your team when you're playing coordinated, and you're able to take advantage of this item all the time, and it has a passive XP gain. But solo, duo, and trio, run away from it. It's terrible. All right, let's see here. Next item, Score Shield. I think Score Shield's probably B tier. I think this Pokemon, excuse me, this item, not this Pokemon. I think this item really fell off, but now with the game being a little more score focused than it was before, I think this actually gets a lot of value, but there are only a handful of Pokemon that use it extremely well. Talonflame, Dodrio, those are really good back cap, off lane pressure Pokemon. A lot of your tankier characters also now have this option as a third slot item. So, you know, let's say you're I don't know, your Snorlax, you're running Buddy Barrier Focus Band or something like that. You could definitely take something like a Score Shield as your next item. You'll have big shields. You can score right in people's faces. You can break a goal so Regieleki can move past it early. I think you can make a lot of plays with this item, and it's interesting because back when it was nerfed, Zapdos was just so incredibly important that it didn't matter at all the scoring you were doing beforehand. And while I think they have pulled Rayquaza down health-wise, so we're back a little closer to where Zapdos was, it still feels like scoring is much more important throughout the game, and I think this item is probably a solid B tier choice right now. Another B tier choice, I think, is Shell Bell. Shell Bell, its internal cooldown a little bit better than it used to be, I believe, but even if not, it gives you move cooldown, you heal off it, and it gives you a nice chunk of special attack. There are a lot of special attackers that I think you can run this on and do just fine. It was kind of hated for a long time, but I think more people are warming up to Shell Bell. It's a pretty decent item for some of your special attackers. However, there are probably a lot of items I'd run before it. Muscle Band, Focus Band, Buddy Barrier, Choice Specs, Energy Amp, maybe even Wise Glasses. They all may take precedence over Shell Bell, but there are a few good options for it. I like running Shell Bell on Mew. Delphox is pretty fun with it sometimes. Gengar, Hex Gengar is really fun with it. There are some pretty good options for Shell Bell. Weakness Policy. This is an interesting item. Weakness Policy came out and it had no place inside the game, and it still doesn't. No, I'm kidding. It had no place inside the game really, just because there were so many items that outshined it. But now, if you're a Pokemon that brawls heavily and you're up in combat a lot, I actually think that this is a pretty dang good item. When they finally buff Scizor, you're going to see this get a lot of use on Scizor. It's pretty good on Pokemon like Machamp. I like it on Lucario from time to time. Tyranitar, I think, takes great. It does really well with this item. Takes great. I don't know. I couldn't even finish that sentence. Charizard is another one. If you're using Fire Punch, Flare Blitz, I like this on Charizard. So you can get bigger shields and you're kind of, you know, any Pokemon where you're up in the mix a lot, I think takes great advantage of an item like this. I've seen people run it on Greedent, Arena, and it's actually a really, really solid item right now. And this is mainly because sort of Buddy Barrier is no longer a must pick. And when Buddy Barrier is not a must pick, even though I think it's still very, very good, items like Weakness Policy, Shell Bell, Energy Amp, they all become much, much more viable. So there you go, our held item tier list. I've been thinking about held items so much lately that I thought this would be a nice time to do this. And now, let's talk about battle items. Battle items, I'm not going to talk for as long about because I actually think there's a lot of personal preference in battle items, but I'll kind of go through them and I'll let you know what I think about each one and kind of what place it holds inside the game right now. Eject button, I think, is either an A or an S tier item. It's probably A tier, but if you're used to playing other MOBAs like League of Legends and things like that, I think a lot of us got used to using Flash and being able to get out of situations. It also can pair well with a lot of Unite moves like Blastoise's Unite. Greedent has some cool Unite options with this. So I think this is a really good item. It's hard to say that Eject button is bad, but probably because of X speed, it's been knocked off its pedestal a little bit. X speed is really interesting because it lets you chase things down, it lets you get away, it's on a lower cooldown than Eject button, it gets you out of things like Slow Smoke or some slows and things like that. So this item actually sees an insane amount of play. It didn't used to, but I think people are recognizing how much they can do with it, how well they can chase with it. So I think the reason Eject is probably not S is because of X speed, which is a really, really good item here. Let's see, Fluffy Tail. Fluffy Tail, I think, is probably C or D. Maybe C. I just don't see anyone run it at all anymore. It was kind of used for, you know, taking wild Pokemon when you would jungle invade, excuse me, or if you were a Pokemon that sort of burnt objectives pretty fast, like a Discharge Zeraora, Stealth Rock Crustle. I think there's probably still some very, very niche uses for it, but you just don't see anyone running Fluffy Tail anymore. It probably needs a little bit of a buff to be a bit more viable. Full Heal I think is either an A or S tier item. There's just so much crowd control, so much CC, as you often hear talked about, or for people who don't know what CC is, it's like a stun, a slow, a knock-up, things like that. So Full Heal puts you in a position to not get taken down or not have to stop using your moves when a ton of crowd control effects are hitting you. And for that reason, the Pokemon that want to run this, the ones that kind of get in and need to use all their moves and kind of go crazy, I'm thinking of Greninjas, Serenas, E-Speed, Lucarios. Being shut down by a crowd control effect is just devastating for some of those Pokemon, but Full Heal really stops that. You can run this on a ton of Pokemon and get a lot of value out of Full Heal. Goal Getter, I think it might even be better than this. I'm gonna put it in B tier, but Goal Getter I think might be better than this right now. It used to be a garbage item, and it was because of Zapdos. So now that Rayquaza is a little more in line with Zap, I hesitate to put it too high, but you can make plays with this, especially with the Ray Shield. You're not getting insta-dunks anymore. You can still use your Goal Getter to get crazy fast dunks when you have your Ray Shield. You can make a lot of plays with Goal Getter right now, and I actually see it provide value where it used to not provide that much value. Potion, it's probably B or C. Here's the thing, it's probably B. It might even be better on certain Pokemon, but it's just so boring. It's such a boring item, nobody likes it. So that's why I think it's probably B. It's definitely a beginner item, but at the same time, just having a thing that gives you an extra chunk of healing, especially if you have a lot of HP, it really isn't bad. It's not bad, it's just not that interesting. Okay, Slow Smoke. Slow Smoke. I can't tell if you're D or C, buddy. I think slow smoke is really, the problem is with so many Pokemon running full heals and X speeds and things like that, slow smoke is just so much worse, and it got that big nerf. So at one point, I don't know if you were playing it this time, but there was the slow smoke meta. Everything was about slow smoke, and now, it just doesn't get used that much anymore. I think you could probably even put it in D tier, and yeah, you wouldn't be too sad about it. I'll put it, I don't know. I kind of even like Fluffy Tail more than it. I think I'm going to put it down here in D tier. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I guess we're not going to get a lot of use out of C tier, because X Attack I'm putting in B tier. X Attack is a weird item. I don't think there are a ton of Pokemon that take huge advantage of this item, but there are a few that when you use it, you get an extra burst of attack speed, attack, or special attack, and I think you can actually do something kind of cool with X Attack. It's just, I'd probably run something that gave me mobility. Mobility is so insanely important in a game like this, so having the ability to move around combat, move around the map, get to something quicker, it just feels like it has a little more value than popping that X Attack, but there are a few Pokemon that people like to run X Attack on. However, there we go. Those are the battle items. Those are the held items. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I am going to get back to climbing my way all the way up to Master Rank. I love you. Mwah!